Okay. 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 So we are now online. I will wait a couple of seconds to allow the public to connect, to join us. Can take some time. Okay. So we'll start now. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, from wherever you connect in the world. I'm Céline Pajon. I'm head of Japan and Indo-Pacific research at IFRI, and I'm delighted to chair this discussion on such a timely and important topic. As you may know, the 53rd Pacific Island Forum, the PIF leaders meeting held in Tonga, just ended a couple of days ago with a busy agenda and actually a controversy over Taiwan's mention in the final communique, a mention that was finally eventually deleted. Back in July, Japan hosted the 10th Pacific Islands Leader Meeting, the Palm Summit in Tokyo. And these two events have the characteristic of gathering the ocean and island states and their partners of dialogue and development, and among them, France and Japan. So to set up a bit the tone for the discussion, I would like to refer to the Fiji Prime Minister Habuka, who recently described the Pacific region as facing a complex polycrisis, marked by interlinked challenges, including climate change, human security issues, transnational crime, severe economic stress, and geopolitical competition. So in this context, how can international actors such as France and Japan best address these challenges in a holistic manner? We'll try to address these broad questions and many others, starting also by how the PICs can themselves try to address this challenge, by looking in particular for this session at the perspective of France and Japan. And I'm very grateful to have with me a distinguished panel of speakers who will share their insight, and I would like to briefly introduce them. So first, Hideyuki Shiozawa is the director of the Division of Island Nations at the Ocean Policy Research Institute of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation in Tokyo. And he actually organized a series of side events around the Palm Summit. So we will share his perspective. What were the main results of the Palm Summit? What did you get about it? And actually, I understand that Shiozawa-san is connecting from Onyala, Solomon Islands. So thank you so much for finding some time to share with us for the discussion. Then I am much honored to welcome Ambassador Véronique Roger-Lacan. She is the French ambassador to the Pacific, and she's based in New Caledonia. She took part to the two events, the Palm Summit and the PIF Leaders Meeting Summit, and she will explain about France's vision and position. So thank you so much for joining the discussion, Madame l'Ambassadrice. Finally, Sandra Tart is the acting head of the School of Law and Social Science and the director of the Politics and International Affairs program at the University of the South Pacific in Fiji. Dr. Tart is a leading academic voice on the political dynamics on the Pacific Islands, and she will reflect on the PIC's view. Thank you so much, Professor, for your participation. So each panelist will have around 10 minutes for its initial remarks, and then I will let them react to each other presentations. Afterwards, I will raise some questions and we'll open the Q&A to the audience. And before we start, let me remind you that this is a public and recorded webinar. And to the audience, you are very much encouraged to write down your questions to the panelists in the Zoom Q&A window, and without waiting, because we have 90 minutes, but it's going to be very short to address a lot of questions. So without further ado, I would like to start our discussion, and I will first invite Shiozawa-san to share his remark with us. Shiozawa-san, everything's good? I will let you can you set that? We cannot hear you. Can you yeah. Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Seri. Can I start?
Yep.
Okay.
Please do.
So in the beginning, I'd like to talk about the things related to Japan's Pacific Island Leaders Summit held in July. It was, first of all, the Palm Summit started in 1997 to build the mutual understanding between Japan and Pacific Island countries as a region. And it's not related to that US-China competition, those kinds. It's purely about Japan and Pacific Island countries. And Japan has also bilateral relations with each Pacific Island country. But PAM is the Japan, multilateral relationship through PIF, the framework PIF. And the point of the PAM 10 was how Japan can rebuild the relationship with Pacific Island countries. Because for these 2 to 3 years, due to the Alps treated water issue, the relationship between Japan, Pacific countries, and especially with PIF became very unhealthy. And it also damaged our, our impression, impression from Japan to Pacific Island countries also. So our focus was how to fix that situation. And with that point, Japan didn't force Pacific countries to support Japan's exploration about treated water, but asked them to collect, precise information about treated water. And after the discussion, when I read the leader's declaration, the format became really different. The previous Palm summits, the declaration shows always Japan's Prime Minister committed something, and PIF leaders take note of the support Japan's commitment of those kinds. But this time, the declaration mentions mainly about leaders said something, leaders agreed something, those kinds. So it means before it was the parallel, like Japanese Prime Minister and PIF leaders, but this time it became like all the leaders under PAM framework. And also the joint action plan said PAM partners. That is a good term for us. So eventually the PAM 10 became like beginning point of the new Japan-Pacific countries relationship. And when I visited PIF Leaders Summit last week in Tonga, PIF framework became very big and important. The centrality is also very strengthened. And when I watched that, the value of PAM became more important, and Japanese side can understand how important it is also. And along with that, Sasaka Peace Foundation, our organization, also hosted the Pacific Island Nations Week. Sasaka Peace Foundation hosted first ever Pacific Island Leaders meeting in 1988. And after that, Japanese government started Palm Summit from 1997. And for us, but to address a variety of issues in the Pacific, we want to encourage to form another platform led by private sector. So we hosted that weeks. We held over 20 seminars for over 20 issues, themes, and we hope that can support Japan to build multi-layered relationship with Pacific Island countries. How many minutes left?
About 4. You can go ahead.
Okay,
can go ahead.
Also, I can share another thing related to PAM. In the PAM summit, PAM 10, Japanese government didn't use FOIP, free and open in the Pacific. But the leaders agreed to work on strengthen or to achieve the vision of rule-based order. And Japanese government also showed what do you call that? Tangible support measures also. And this time, Minister of Justice, Minister of Defense, and the Japan Coast Guard also clearly mentioned their activities or plans to work with. So in that sense, our relationship for realizing or support rule-based order became deeper and deeper. And when we talk about security issues, there are two pillars. One is about defense, another one will be law enforcement. And in Japan, before the defense is by Ministry of Defense. When we talk about maritime security, defense side is by Ministry of Defense, and law enforcement is by Japan Coast Guard. But this year, their relationship became much closer and cooperate each other. So that is a good development for our side. And during the summit, also Minister of Defense mentioned that they will also increase their engagement with the countries which does not have military forces. That is also a big development. And for us, when we talk about security matters in the region, the targets are different. I just share 3 kinds. One is about Taiwan contingency case. It is very serious for Japan. But in that case, when we work with Pacific countries, mainly with those US freely associated states, they are very serious with US. And when we talk about the region-wide security issues, it will be like disaster response, also stability of the region. So the target will be different. And also when we talk about law enforcement, it will be for illegal to work for those illegal drugs and also human trafficking, those kinds. But those will be Ministry of Justice and probably Japan Coast Guard or those kind. So our approach became more, like I say, multi-layered and not simple ones. It became more complex, but the Japanese government tried to address each of those issues. Right, thank you.
Thank you so much, Yuzawa-san, for this. For this broad description of what happened at the Palm Thames, I think it's very important that you highlighted the way that such countries like Japan is trying to build up a kind of equal-based relations with the PICs and taking into consideration the PICs' priority and interest. I looked at the joint communique and also the action plan, and one important thing is that it seems that the 2050 strategy for Blue Pacific continent was at the starting point of all this reflection about the setting up the cooperation with the Pacific Island countries. So I think it's very positive. So I will come back to you later on, asking you your reactions and more questions. But for now, I would like to turn to Madame l'Ambassadrice, Véronique Roger-Lacan. Would you be able to share your perspective on what France is doing in the region and about the latest developments? Oh, you need to unmute yourself. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Excellent.
Okay. So thank you very much, Céline. Shizawa-san, thank you, and Professor Tate. Happy to be with the three of you and with the public to discuss this issue, which is very important. And Shizawa-san mentioned the fact that the approach of Japan to the Pacific is multi-layered. I would maybe concur with that for France, because there are, I would say, numerous regional organizations with which either we participate, or we are, as Japan, with the PIC, we are partners for dialogue, for example, with the PIC. And there are multinational frameworks for our cooperation in the Pacific. I will mention all of them. And also, because of the three territories that are now French territories with different statuses, the three of them, we have also a kind of a footprint in the Pacific. And I will mention the legal basis for these footprints, and also describe very quickly all the types of cooperation that stem from the various types of statuses. So maybe to start with the organizations in which we participate, we are founding members, and we've been participating in the SPC, the South Pacific Cooperation Organization, and we are in this organization fighting with all of the members and we would say that we are sitting in a group which is called the metropolitan groups, including the UK, the US, but also Australia and New Zealand, although they are full members themselves of the PIC. And in the SPREP, the SPREP is the South Pacific Regional Environment Program. It used to be an organization or division of the SPC before, then it separated. So now there are two different distinct regional organizations in which we are full members. So this is important. So as I said, with the PIC, we are partners for dialogue. There is also when I talk about the territories, maybe it's important to mention the fact that with New Caledonia, French Polynesia, and Wallis and Futuna, for historic reasons, we've been administering these territories. The basis for this administering relationship is, if we talk about the United Nations Charter, is the resolution maybe 1541. I mean, this is one of the legal bases of this our relationship with at least French Polynesia and New Caledonia, and it is a relationship which stems from the principle of self-determination, which is enshrined in the United Nations Charter, but also in the French Constitution. I might come back to that. Wallis and Futuna is a full territory of France, and this is based on the will of the people of Wallis and Futuna. For New Caledonia and French Polynesia, based on the will of the people, in New Caledonia, the Nouméa Agreement, and in French Polynesia, the negotiation on the organic law that organizes the autonomy of French Polynesia. And at the same time, from the Nouméa Agreement, you have the League organic law that organizes the autonomy of New Caledonia. So this is multi-layered institutional and legal approach. I would concur with Shiozawa-san on the fact that we need to first, our approach is a rules-based approach, a rules-based order approach. This is why we keep on insisting on international public law, this law that organizes, as there is a law which organizes the relationships with individuals within one country, there is this international public law that organizes the relationships within member states of the international community. And the very objective of our foreign policy is to make sure that this law is systematically respected, and it's not try to identify ways to have this law respected for the relationship to be, as stated in the United Nations, peaceful types of relationships, and systematically to avoid the use of violence. Then we talk also about sharing of information and transparency and exchanges of information. This is very important, and this is why the partnership in these organizations, the membership in these organizations, but also the partnership in the PIC, for example, is very important, because it appears that there is a very important need to share this type of information. And Kozawa-san was talking about the treated waters and the need to share very precise and rigorous information. It is the case also on the issue of New Caledonia, because we won't hide the fact. Everybody has this in mind. That there is a crisis that started on the 13th of May, and that there has been a lot said that might have should have to be clarified. And I will come back to that, because I'm sure I will have questions on that, so I don't want to spend too much time during this 10 minutes presentation. And then maybe on the basis of these partnerships, these memberships, and these special statuses of the French territories in the Pacific, therefore of the French footprint in the Pacific, mentioning maybe the areas on which we work and we share, we cooperate with the member states of and the territories of the Pacific. We have first this mechanism on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. This is one thematic which is very important, because it is one of the needs and one of the policies and some of the capacity that the states in the region need. So we have, thanks to the capacities that are deployed on the territories of New Caledonia and French Polynesia, there are a number of capacities that can be used to assist in disaster management and assist relief, to assist the population in instances of volcano eruptions or cyclones or tsunamis or anything. And in this thematic, we cooperate with Australia and New Zealand, and we have this mechanism which is called France. We meaning France, Australia, and New Zealand, where we cooperate on how to deploy, who will deploy first. Maybe we can use some French naval capacities to bring some Australian tanks or vice versa. So this is a mechanism which is very much used and reused. And now this mechanism will be plugged to the SPC, and there is a proposal to build some warehouses next to the places where there is a potential of humanitarian disasters. One question though on those things is the fact that in fact the need for the stocks to be placed is more next to where the capacities to deploy them are, rather than next to the places where they are needed. But this is a logistical discussion, but which has its strategic meaning. So this is one thing. Illegal fishing is also obviously a very, very important issue for the region, given the fact that the small territories have very often huge economic zones, and that they have different types of management. But anyway, illegal fishing is a very, very strong area. It is the livelihood of the region, and it is also coupled with the issue of illegal fishing is the issue of freedom of circulation on the high seas and of respect of the convention, the Montego Bay Convention on the Law of the Sea. This is something very important. Then the conservation of biodiversity is also obviously something absolutely key for the region. Our development agency, Agence Française de Développement, has increased by 5 its involvement, its budget that is being spent in the Pacific for the small islands. And then we have a third item, which is the strengthening of infrastructures and connectivity. The need to make sure that all those islands connect through also planes, air transportation. We are working on that, and we would like to work on that with other countries in the region, but also increase exchanges of students and researchers, building on the future, building on the new generations. For them, they are already connected, and we need to connect them, help them connect even more. Lastly, maybe sharing one point on the United Nations Ocean Convention conference that we will host together with Costa Rica in June 25 in Nice, and where we are really calling for a strong contribution of the Pacific island countries and territories, because they are a fundamental stakeholders of this issue. So I don't know how much time I have left. I think I've covered my 10 minutes, and thank you. I'm ready for questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. It was an excellent point. Thank you for underlining, trying to explain about the specificity and the complexity of the French presence and role in the region, as friends, but also as with some administered territories in the regions that have also specific role, and they are full members of the Pacific Island Forum and so on. And of course, I will be back to you later on about the situation in New Caledonia. Obviously, that is now standing items in the PIF leaders meeting. And I believe that Troika-led information mission was agreed upon to New Caledonia. So I would be interested to get your perspective on this. What would be the objectives, and what do you expect of this mission? Thank you also for highlighting France's various contribution to the security of the region, obviously in a broad manner: human security, climate security, HADR. All this is very important, and I see a lot of synergy with what Japan wants to achieve also in the regions, and what Japan is doing in the region. So I will also ask you about the prospect for enhanced cooperation between France and Japan in this various domain in the region. And now I would like to give the floor to Sandra Tartt, and I would like to ask you, well, there's a lot of partners who are trying to reach out to the Pacific Island countries, which is quite positive. But how do those countries look at that? What are their priority expectation? What is the challenges and so on? What is your perspective on that?
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the introduction, and mostly for the invitation to be part of this panel discussion with Shiozawa-san and with Madam Ambassador Veronique Roger-Lacan. I've been asked to speak on perspectives of the Pacific Island countries regarding their priorities for cooperation, and to reflect on both Japan and France's engagement in the region. This is a big topic, obviously, and I'll try and do justice to it in my brief remarks. On priorities for cooperation, I think these are very well captured in the communique of the most recent Pacific Islands Forum. If you look at the theme of the forum, transformative and resilient Pacific, build better now. If you look to the various items on the communique, which include the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, health, education, climate change, Pacific Resilience Facility, peace and security, fisheries and oceans. I think we can see encapsulated here the region's most pressing priorities or priority areas. We've seen a concerted effort by the Pacific in recent years to define their collective agenda and priorities. And this, of course, is reflected in the 2050 strategy. This strategy provides not only a roadmap for regionalism, but also guidelines, perhaps guardrails as well, for how our key partners, which include Japan and France, engage with the region. The adoption of this strategy is a notable achievement and must be seen as evidence of the Pacific's desire for self-determination and agency in shaping and securing our future. This regional effort, however, has had to contend with some serious challenges in recent years. The COVID pandemic had a profound effect on Pacific Island economies and has obviously tested our resilience. Also, regional divisions that erupted over the leadership of the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat, which saw 5 countries exit the Pacific Islands Forum. They have now all returned, but underlying tensions remain. There is another challenge, though, that has emerged as particularly problematic for the Pacific, and that is the impact of geopolitical tensions, which have increasingly permeated the region and influence the engagement of our partners. Concerns about the polarizing and disruptive effects of these geopolitical dynamics have been expressed with greater frequency in the past year or so. Whereas previously, Pacific leaders tended to view geopolitical rivalry as providing opportunities for new partnerships or to invigorate old partners, or as distracting from more important priorities and issues, and thus competing with the Blue Pacific narrative. Now there is recognition of the dangers inherent in this escalating strategic competition, that this competition is in fact threatening the security and sovereignty of the Pacific. This is why Fiji's Prime Minister has advocated the Pacific Zone or Ocean of Peace concept, and the Pacific Islands Forum has supported the development of a declaration to this effect in the coming year. Both France and Japan are important and long-standing friends and partners of the Pacific. It is important to acknowledge the positive relationships we have built over the years, political, economic, cultural, and security related. But we should not overlook the differences and disagreements that also exist. One important difference being that while France and Japan view the region through a particular geopolitical lens, this is not generally shared by Pacific Island countries. As sovereign states, Pacific countries know they have the right to decide their own interests and priorities, and have the right to decide who to cooperate with in order to advance those interests. The fact that this right may be circumscribed is one of the dangers of the current geopolitical context I alluded to above. That is also why the 2050 Blue Pacific strategy is so important for the region. Implementing this strategy is a shared challenge for all of us, Pacific Island states and forum partners alike. I would argue the 2050 strategy provides a basis for collective action that is inclusive of all key actors in the region. 6 years ago, at the PAM Summit of 2018, the Japanese government unveiled its Free and Open Indo-Pacific, or FOIP, strategy to the Pacific Island leaders, with the expectation that the Pacific would readily sign on to this document with minimal consultation and consideration. The leaders and the PIF Secretariat were not impressed. I think we have moved on from that disconnect. Since then, there have been 3 visits to the region by Japan's foreign ministers after a gap of 32 years. And I think the recent PAM Summit provided a basis for very constructive and positive exchanges and agreements, very much framed around the Pacific's priorities, as Hide-san noted. Among these priorities, I would highlight supporting Pacific-led climate change efforts, and specifically support for the newly established Pacific Resilience Facility. I think this is an important initiative that represents an innovative and outside-the-box approach to addressing the challenges of climate change finance and adaptation. The Pacific Resilience Facility is the world's first regional fund dedicated to resilience. It can be seen as an initiative that aims to take back some control for the region over infrastructure financing, especially financing of small-scale climate resilient projects. It would help make such funding more accessible and also reduce the fragmentation in climate and infrastructure financing that is currently being experienced. So far, the US, Australia, Saudi Arabia, and China have made commitments to support this facility. And the UN Secretary General last week has endeavored to build on these commitments at the UN. It is hoped that Japan and France will also step up. PALM 10 was also an opportunity for Pacific Island leaders to consult on the unfolding crisis in one of their member countries, New Caledonia. It was where the initial proposal for a visit by a foreign delegation to New Caledonia was formulated. The Palm Summit thus occurred at a fortuitous moment and facilitated crisis meetings between Pacific Island leaders unrelated to their Palm agenda. Madam Chair, I will stop there and look forward to comments and questions in the discussions to come. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Thank you for explaining about the PICs perspective. I understand that what you said about the 2050 Blue Pacific strategy, I think it is indeed a very important, key document. Sometimes it is also a bit criticized because it's very broad and it may be a bit challenging to actually actionate and concretize these various priorities. So I would be also interested to have your vision on that afterwards. And also you referred to the concept of ocean of peace, which is not very well known in Europe or in other parts of the world. So if you could elaborate later on a bit on this, it will be also very useful. You rightly observe that the geopolitical competition is putting a lot of pressure on the PICs and maybe undermining their solidarity. And you haven't referred so much about also what China is doing in the region. You referred to Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific strategy, but I remember that 2 years ago, the foreign minister from China, Wang Yi, made a tour in the region and they proposed a kind of agreement, cooperation agreement, very wide, very broad, and I believe, as you said, that the Pacific Islands were not so impressed about it. But I understand also that there are various visions within the region about how to cooperate with China. So and the latest controversy over the Taiwan mentions in the Peace Leaders Meeting communique, I think, is a good example of this. So I would be also interested to get your view on that later on. But for now, I would like to go back again and to turn to Shiozawa-san to ask for his further remarks, reactions on other speakers' remarks, and also maybe to highlight how France and Japan could expand their cooperation in this region. So Shiozawa-san, and to the public, please do not hesitate to write down your questions in the Q&A. Unless you do that, I will have the floor for myself and will ask my own questions, and you might be frustrated. So do write down your questions. So Shiozawa-san, you have some remarks to make.
Thank you, Celine. I think when you talk about the cooperation between Japan and France, I think we are also complicated. I mean, maybe we misunderstand something, but there are 2 layers to cooperate with France. One is Japan's cooperation with French territories in the Pacific. Another one is cooperation between Japan and Paris. And I'm not clear about the process to work with New Caledonia and also French Polynesia. In July, during our event, we invited some leaders for keynote speech, and kindly President Brazzason from French Polynesia visited us and provided very good remarks. And this is not clear, but if any organizations or Japanese government wants to work with those territories, it must be go through Paris government or directly work with, can we work with the government of French Polynesia? That is not clear. And other things, when we think of the cooperation region-wide with France, good point is that how Japan to cooperate with those disaster risk reduction or disaster response, which France already have the framework with Australia, New Zealand in the southern part of the Pacific. I think the also Japan has variety of schemes addressing challenges related to climate change, education, health, those kinds. I think the governments, Paris government and Tokyo can start some kind of, like I say, the dialogues, how to not overlap, but how to make synergies among us. First step is to share what we are doing in the region and what Japanese side to know what France is doing in the region. Still, the information is limited in Japan about France. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you made a very good point regarding the risk of overlapping or offering too many cooperation schemes to the Pacific Island countries, which are actually limited human resources and limited way to absorb all these offers. So I think one key issue is try to coordinate as much as possible among the dialogue and cooperation partners in the region and avoid overlapping actions or organization as much as possible. And maybe I would like to ask you a further question on this, because Japan is also cooperating with its partners, the US, Australia, and others, bilaterally in the region, but also within the framework of the Quad. I believe there are some initiative. Japan is also part of the partners in the Blue Pacific, which is a US-led initiative. So how do you see this multi-layer effort? You know, trying to provide actually efficient cooperation and not duplicate.
Yeah, it's complicated, but so there are those frameworks like PVP, Quad, and other things. But basically, each country has its own schemes and themes, and those framework will not change those schemes of each country. So important thing is how to communicate each other to avoid overlapping or same duplication of those kinds among development partners. And one thing I heard in one of the Pacific countries was those implementing organizations of those countries or embassies start to collaborate each other. And what they're doing is to share to share their plans or ongoing projects on the ground. And if there is, for example, if there are any projects related to solid waste management, they share details and try to make good synergy among them. But in any case, for the Pacific, those development partners needs to now to centralize to PI framework, like a 2050 strategy. So we have to, not we, but those countries must have to involve those government, those recipient government, and also hopefully PIF Secretariat to make good coordination. That is my
Okay,
that is
thanks a
for
lot.
you.
Thanks a lot. I will go back to you later on with further questions, but that's not a good. It's a good start. Now I would like to turn to Véronique Roger-Lacan. Maybe you can react to the other presentation and add some elements about the situation in New Caledonia. I see that there is actually questions about it. So maybe can you highlight what's going on, the latest development, the role of these Troika missions, and what kind of how it will plays in the dialogue and in the ongoing process between Paris and New Caledonia to try to appease the situation and also think about the further institutional status of the territory. Ambassador, can you you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Maybe I will react quickly to one point. I concur totally with the way things have been described on the weight of the geopolitical competition or new type of geopolitical framework, consequences on the relationship within the Pacific. At the same time, it's not that it is something that Pacific Island countries undergo. They are actors as much as any other state in the world. In the UN, the principle is one state, one voice. So they have all the ability and freedom to decide on their own, as Madame Tart said, on their own fate and their own the schemes that they want to adopt. If, the instruments, the tools are there, and as Madame Tart said, the PIF is a demonstration of this total and very admirable capacity. Now, one point on the Pacific Resilience Facility and the question that was put very clearly to France and Japan, asking why and I mean whether and when we would start considering joining the facility scheme. I would like to mention that for the time being, we have asked many questions on the governance of this Pacific Religions Facility. It's been now 1 year since the last summit in Rarotonga that it was announced. Even already there, we said that we were interested, but that the governance and the way it works is not clear enough for all our very, I don't know what, cumbersome, rigorous procedures to correspond to the needs of the facility. So we are eager to understand, know, and check how we can cooperate. On the cooperation with Japan, I think there is a huge ground for cooperation. There are many projects that we have offered and that I myself locally have offered to both the head of the Japanese bureau in New Caledonia and the colleagues of the Japanese embassy in Paris, but also Tokyo, on which to cooperate. There are a number of cultural projects, support to, Oceanian culture, audiovisual production, also maybe the creation of an Oceanian platform comparable to Netflix or other types of platforms. It could be producing and protecting content, local content. That could be an example of cooperation, but also for scholarships and exchanges of students and so on. There is a great deal that we can do. There is also a cooperation that I forgot to mention in my introduction, and in which France and Japan cooperate, which is the SPADM, the South Pacific Defense Ministers meeting. It does not bring together all the Pacific Island countries, because not all of them have defense forces, but the ones which have defense forces are cooperating within this format, and Japan is in there with France. We also have bilateral cooperation, and there are lots of exercises, HADR exercises and cooperation that we have. Now, Shawaz-Afan asked a very precise question, and I'm happy to answer it, because I know that it is it raises, I mean, it is something that is not very well known in the region, but also in the world. It is the specific status of the territories that I mentioned. And how can Japan and other partners cooperate specifically with New Caledonia and French Polynesia, given the fact that they are autonomous territories, but that they are autonomous French territories. So the two organic laws that organize the autonomy of those territories have devoluted most of the state competencies to New Caledonia and to French Polynesia in two distinct constitutional laws. So they have devoluted most of those competencies, except the very sovereign ones. So security, defense, law and order are kept within the exclusive limits of the French state competence. All the rest is devoluted to respectively New Caledonia and French Polynesia. And the two constitutional laws state precisely that the two territories can do whatever they want, but it always has to be within the global chapeau of the French Republic international commitments. Like, for example, let's take the example of the Fukushima waters. It is an international global commitment within the IAEA that the release of those waters has been allowed through very strong studies and everything. And so it's a French Republic international commitment taken within the IAEA that New Caledonia and French Polynesia are supposed to comply with when, for example, there is such a discussion in the Pacific Island format. And if I go a little bit further, if we take the example of, I don't know, tax law, trade law, primary education, they can negotiate whatever they want in this framework. But ultimately, if there is a signature of a bilateral commitment or something like that, the French state has to check whether the content of those agreements comply with overall French Republic international commitments. So if we take the example of the PIC, French Polynesia and New Caledonia are, yes, full members of the PIC, whereas the French state is not a full member of the PIC. French state is a dialogue partner, this is it. But the commitments that French Polynesia and New Caledonia adhere to within the PIC always have to comply with the overall international commitments of the French Republic. Or if there are, for example, some commitments which are security, defense, law and order, and so on, they are supposed to refer back to the French state, because those are security, defense, law and order are exclusive are exclusive competencies of the French state. So if there are, for example, commitments in the peace on the fight against corruption, or the fight against illegal trafficking and so on, all those are exclusive French state competencies. So it doesn't mean that they are prevented from taking such a commitment. On the contrary, because we just have to organize things together, cooperate, and in the end, this is it should be for us. It is viewed as a multiplier for everyone, for them, because they can, for the time being, based on the status that they have for the time being, they can they have some autonomous capacities, and it's a scheme of shared competencies, shared sovereignty, but they could not take some agreements that rely, like, for example, if there is a creation of this Australian police initiative, neither New Caledonia nor French Polynesia will be able to commit capacity, because the capacities are exclusive French state capacities. So I can spend a lot of time giving you examples, but I don't want to. I think I have questions. I'm trying to read them.
Yeah, the questions are about New Caledonia. Yeah, the situation in New Caledonia.
Let me read one. Yes, Pacific leaders are dismayed by violence in New Caledonia, which echoes the tragic event of the 1980s. Should the French state engage in genuine dialogue and compromise with anti-political actors rather than a curfew, mass arrest, and militarization of the territory? Well, okay, this is a question which is the labeling of the question is rather.
You disappeared from the screen, Ambassador.
Yeah, yes, I'm trying to come back. And then another question after the Matignon and Nouméa Accord, there have been 30 years of effort to successfully make France accepted as a member of the Pacific family. Have they been wasted because of the stubborn and ill-advised hold of the latest referendum during? Okay, so I see the question. So maybe I will just take what the way things should be understood, and talking about the dismay of the Pacific leaders, I must say, and I'm coming then to your question, Céline, on the peace mission in New Caledonia. We've met, and we thank very much Japan for enabling those meetings that we had on the margins of the Palm meeting in Japan, because indeed PIF and New Caledonia, as a full member of the PIF, had started discussion on what could the PIF do. And when the PIF leaders met in the margins of the Palm meeting, they realized, because we were there and we could explain exactly what I've just explained to you on the framework of foreign relations of both New Caledonia and particularly in this case of New Caledonia, that inviting an international organization in New Caledonia is the competence of the French state. And we've seen many, there were in the press lots of questions on, I was saying that the PIF can say whatever they want on this issue. They always have, they will need to consult also the French authorities. And if we talk about hosting the Troika at Prime Minister level, it is the President of the French Republic who has to decide who comes on the French territory, because within this self-determination scheme, France is New Caledonia is the territory of France. We know how much that can generate the type of comments and feelings that this can generate, I want to reassure everyone on the fact that the legal scheme that characterizes the fact that New Caledonia is France now, it's a United Nations scheme. It is the self-determination scheme. As long as New Caledonia, because we talk about this only, is considered within the current framework offered by the United Nations, within Resolution 1541, and as the status is now, it is a French territory. And France is doing everything possible to offer to the New Caledonians. And here I would like to correct maybe something, Céline, that you said, because you mentioned the discussion between France and New Caledonia. It's not a question between France and New Caledonia. It is a question between the New Caledonians community as described and as stated in the Nouméa Agreement. The Nouméa Agreement is an agreement which has been negotiated and signed by all the Caledonians. It's an agreement that, together with the agreement that had been decided before in 88, which recognizes the colonial mistakes of the past, and which creates it is a rebalancing act. Recognizing the mistakes of the past, it recognizes also that there is a need to come back to first the natives. In French, it is called le peuple d'origine, le peuple d'origine, so the natives, and that the natives have a right to have their culture enhanced and explained and lived and so on. So there is a huge recognition of that. And also with this, the devolution of competencies to the government of New Caledonia, with the creation of local structures, government of New Caledonia, provinces, Congress, everything is now in the hands of the Caledonians. But what is recognized in the Nouméa Agreement is that, yes, there are the native people, but there are also people who by history have happened to be in New Caledonia and consider that their life is there. So the discussion now is within the New Caledonian to identify a solution, which is one of the three solutions offered by Resolution 1541 of the United Nations General Assembly on self-determination. So the French state has kept, keeps, and will keep offering to the New Caledonian people a self-determination scheme, and self-determination being identified in this 1541 resolution as three solutions: independence, state association, and integration into an already independent state. It is up to the Caledonian people, as defined in the Nouméa Agreement, to identify together the way they want to organize their self-determination. And France has kept offering this dialogue, and it's keeping to offer this dialogue. One of the questions is mentioning a stubborn policy. This is really the way I believe the debate should take place, which is very important, is to step out and to take a little bit of distance from this vocabulary, which does not bring any solution now. Stubborn policy, I don't really understand what it refers to. Everything is firstly public. All the discussions are public. The dates of the referendum, all the discussions that have been used by the rioters as a pretext for destroying New Caledonia are are things that were discussed genuinely within the French state and with all the Caledonian authorities. There is no discrimination, there is no persecution, there is no militarization. There are dialogues and lots of possibilities that are offered by the Nuremberg Agreement and the constitutional laws that stem from this agreement. Dialogue that have been offered and some parties that have stopped discussing. One can see that within the independentist grouping, now there are some huge discussions on what is the way forward. So we want to reassure that the French state is there and that it has never departed and it will not depart ever from the constitutional principle of self-determination for any of the overseas territories. It is the choice of the people who live on those territories.
Well, Madam Ambassador, thank you so much for very candidly responding to the questions and make the effort to provide lengthy explanations about the specificities of French territories in the region and how what is the situation right now and how it might proceed in the future. I think it's very precious to have your explanations right now, because of course there have been a lot of discussion and controversies. So thank you so much. And I would like to turn to Sandra Tart. What are your reactions to Madam Ambassador just explained about the situation in New Caledonia, and also please react to other points and then to my questions also about Ocean of Peace and so on.
Thank you. Perhaps just to go back in time to remember that it was the intervention by the South Pacific Forum in 1986 that led to the reinscription of New Caledonia on the UN Decolonization Committee, the vote by the General Assembly. And significantly, Japan voted with the Pacific on that issue, causing quite a strong reaction from France at the time. And the reason Japan did that was it was trying to build good relations with the South Pacific countries in the context of the Cold War, and seeking to align more with also the US in supporting a more Western orientation for the South Pacific. And voting for the reinscription of New Caledonia was seen as one way of paving the way for what was going to be the visit of a foreign minister to the Pacific and a rebuilding of the relationship with the Pacific. So fast forward now, perhaps just to also point out that in 1997, when PALM was first instigated, as Hide-san said, there was no geopolitical agenda then, because there were no geopolitical interests at that time with regard to the Pacific. And in fact, Japan was searching for some formulation in which to engage with the Pacific, where there weren't any strategic or other compelling interests. It's only in recent times that the geopolitical factor has become more and more important. And the issue, I suppose, I wanted to raise here was that this can very much skew the kind of interventions and the perhaps the motivations for engagement with the Pacific. I think I deliberately did not mention China in my remarks, but I certainly would concur that when, just as happened in 2018, when Japan introduced the FOIP onto the Pacific, expecting their buy-in, China did exactly the same thing in 2022, coming to the region with a predetermined plan for cooperation at the regional level, without consulting with any countries prior to that. It's no wonder that the countries refused to buy into that as well. I think the whole point of having the 2050 strategy, yes, it is big, it's bold, it can in fact become full of too many things and nothing, is that it provides that basis for the engagement, the interaction, the partnerships that the Pacific wants, where it's hopefully going to be a chance to listen and understand both sides. I agree that we need to understand the geopolitical concerns of our partners, but our partners need to understand the Pacific priorities here, and that they don't have to share the same views as our partners, whether it's to do with China or anything else. And I really think that there is too much of an assumption here that the Pacific is to be told who they can be friends with, rather than being free to decide who they can be friends with. The ocean of peace I see as an opportunity to really, I mentioned the word guardrails before, set up certain guardrails where the kind of interventions, whether it's military, whether it's political, or whether it's something else, are in fact carefully managed. And we don't see Pacific Island countries being inadvertently dragged into conflicts, or where their sovereignty is undermined because of the geopolitical environment. And I would like to see the ocean of peace and I think the principles that are going to be set out as perhaps providing the basis to a code of conduct, where major powers, our partners, agree on the terms in which they engage with the Pacific, and trying to stand firm on issues of demilitarization, self-determination, and justice for the region. I think climate justice and other sorts of justice are very important here. So we want a peaceful and just resolution, obviously, to New Caledonia's future. I think it's complicated now by the fact that New Caledonia is a full member of the Pacific Islands Forum. When the South Pacific Forum was first formed, it was very clear that only countries which had the full power to make their own decisions were members. And countries that had formulated their end, if you like, political status were then admitted. There were a lot of tensions earlier on with Papua New Guinea wanted to be a member before it had really reached its end stage of decolonization. Countries were very firm on that. But as we know, in 2016, that principle was not followed, and we now see a situation where New Caledonia and French Polynesia are full members, but obviously without concluding their political status, their future political status. And so the Pacific Islands Forum is really caught between a rock and a hard place in terms of how it engages, who it engages with, and what assistance it can offer. So I hope that our ocean of peace might perhaps provide some way of approaching this, but obviously this is for France and New Caledonia primarily to resolve. So with the obviously the support of the UN and partners in the region. So I might pause at that point, Celine. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your reactions. I would like to maybe to push you a little bit on that, because you referred to the agency of the PICs and the fact that we have to respect and not to undermine their sovereignty, and I fully agree with that. And I believe, actually, from what I understand, that what Japan and France are doing in the regions are also based on this same assumption and objective, is actually not to push this country to cooperate, or to force them to accept some scheme for cooperation, but actually to try to reinforce at some point their resilience, and the fact that they can actually they are in a good position to choose for themselves. We do know that there is a lot of issues regarding some high level of debt of some Pacific Islands countries, including vis-à-vis China. We know that there was some kind of interference, some practices of corruption and so on. So I think it's also important to go back to what we explained about the rules-based order, and the fact that it is important also to underline the international norms and trying to reach out to their partners in an equal way. And I to my understanding, that's the approach of both Japan and France. But maybe you can tell me more about it. And I would be also interested to get your vision about the Philippi agreement between Tuvalu and Australia. It was also very much discussed, but in this case, it seems that it looks like a voluntary, concession from Tuvalu to provide some ways on the territory and so on to Australia to get some advantage in terms of migrations corridor when the climate change is putting the country under too much pressure and is pressing the population to go out. So how would you qualify this type of agreement?
Thank you, Celine. For Tuvalu, I think obviously they are trying to be as innovative and as future look, sort of you look into the future as much as possible. And in this context, it's probably understandable what they are doing with regard to Australia, but I would also say that they are still committed to their sovereignty as a nation, whatever happens in terms of climate change. And the idea of having a fixed set of maritime baselines, which the Pacific Islands Forum has been advocating for, is seeking to try and, I think, establish basic principles here that climate change and sea level rise may, in fact, challenge our traditional understanding of sovereign states, territorial entities. However, the rights of people belonging to those states remain in some form going forward. I think, you refer to the rules, and the Pacific is, I think, whether it's our own constitution, I come from Fiji, I know what it means to have coups happen and the rules become meaningless. We've had 4 coups, we've had 4 constitutions. I mean, we need some respect for the rule of law domestically and as well internationally. But I also know that in the real world, major powers can break the rules when it suits them, often with impunity. And it's very important that we have a system of rules which are in fact justly and consistently applied to everyone. And I think, we have a history in the Pacific where, I know there's a lot of concern and fear-mongering about China at the moment, including the fact that New Caledonia's future would be, as an independent state, compromised because of China's influence, and therefore perhaps independence for New Caledonia should not be supported. I would argue also, though, that in the past, our traditional partners have been just as guilty of actions such as nuclear testing, nuclear legacy issues in parts of Micronesia, greenhouse gas emissions, illegal fishing, non-respect of the rule of law. It goes on. So it's not just, I know we focused a lot on China now, it's not just China. I think we need to remember that. The Pacific remembers that, and it's, I think that's where we're coming from at this point in time, trying to establish relationships that are based on respect, trust, and, honesty as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for reminding that. I think, it was part of our discussion. I think Shiozawa-san rightly pointed, the issue of the nuclear wastewater in the Pacific, and we know that France and Japan has this terrible background regarding nuclear and so on. So I think it's still in the mind of the partners as well. But thank you very much for reminding that. So now we have just 5 minutes away from the end of this discussion. So I would like to go back again to Shiozawa-san and to Ambassador Roger Lacan to ask for their further reactions on what Sandra Attard just just said, and maybe to acknowledge about the contentious issues that you have with the PICs in the region, but also trying to provide a kind of bright note at the end, positive note about how to go ahead and what would be the main assets of your country, what would be the priority